exercises, and that is this, is to project forward to December 31st, 2013, and say, this has been the best year of my life. And if you were to do that, then ask yourself the question, what would have happened to make 2013 the best year of my life? You know, as I know, that the more you have a vision, a clear idea of where you want to end up down the road, start with the end in mind, the more likely it is you'll achieve it. So one of the things that people need to do is keep thinking, what would have to happen to make this the best year of my life?
I love that. So Brian, let's go back to the beginning. Let's start by having you tell us when you discovered the proper process of goal setting and the kind of impact that it's had on your life.
Well, I bombed out of high school. I fooled around too much. I got into trouble. I worked at laboring jobs for several years. I was struggling. I was working as a cold-collar salesman, living literally from day to day and missing meals. And one day I was sleeping on the floor of a friend's little apartment, and I came across a book that said, if you want to be successful, you have to set goals and you need to write them down. So I took a scrap of paper and I wrote down 10 goals that I wanted to achieve. And they were ridiculous goals. Make a lot of money, have clothes, have my own place. 30 days later, my whole life changed. Within 30 days, it was almost like a completely new world. I lost the list, but I know that most of the things that I achieved were on that list. And I have become a lifelong goal setter ever since.
Yeah, I tell a story often about when I was 18 years old, I was waiting for a table in the lobby of a restaurant, and I met a guy who we struck up a conversation, and he invited me to a seminar. I'd never been to a seminar. I was only 18 years old, and that's where I really discovered the idea of having 100% accountability for your life. And then afterwards, he agreed to meet with me a couple of times for lunch at that same restaurant, in fact, and he taught me the process of goal setting. And then a measurement system to guide you through to the actual achievement of those goals. And that system I've used for 2 decades. And it has been, I would say, it's been worth for me several millions of dollars just learning that process. I attribute it as the number one skill that has created any unusual success that I've had. And the odd thing about it was, at 18, before I had turned 19, I had earned a 6-figure income. And then I went on to be an entrepreneur and never looked back. And the thing that's interesting for me, Brian, is that I get a chance to interview a lot of extraordinary achievers, thought leaders like you, as well as those who are putting that dent in the universe out there as CEOs of billion-dollar brands and so forth. And the consistency that I find amongst all those great achievers, this is a big common question I get asked. Number one is that they are committed to continual learning. But the second thing is that they all have clearly defined goals and a plan to achieve them. So if anybody wants to sort of decode what it is that these extraordinary achievers do that most everybody else doesn't do, I'm giving you the numbers that fit into the lock that will unlock it for you too. One is continual learning, and number two is having clearly defined goals and a plan to achieve them. So Brian, this is what baffles me. The problem I see in regards to this topic is that it's talked about all the time. There's probably not a person on the planet who hasn't heard that they should decide what they want, write it down as a goal, and then go about the business of trying to achieve it. Yet, if you walk up to most people and ask to see their written list of goals, they don't have one. This dumbfounds me regularly. So besides your own testimony about it, let's see if we can convince our esteemed listeners to finally become committed goal setters and give them the firepower to convince their teams to be so as well. So Brian, how would you answer the question, why set goals?
Well, I've given this a lot of thought, and I think when you start off in life, it's almost like starting off across a foreign country with no road signs and no road maps, trying to aim at a distant destination, which you really are not even clear about where it is or what it is. So imagine you have two people. One person starts off, no maps, no road signs, no instructions, and just heads out. But the other person sits down, thinks exactly where they want to go, gets a map, makes a plan step by step, schedules it, organizes it, and so on, and sets off. Which one is going to get to their goals faster? Mm-hmm. And here's my answer. I call it the 10 times factor, is that you'll achieve your goals 10 times faster and with greater probability if you're absolutely crystal clear about what it is you want and how to get there, as opposed to just driving around in circles, which is what most people do most of their lives.
Yeah, I use the same analogy. I say, let's say I took a briefcase and I filled it with $1 million in cash, and I'll give you that briefcase if you can find it. What I'm going to do, here you and I are in San Diego, California, Brian, I'm going to drop it on the back porch of some house somewhere here in San Diego. How long might it take for you to find that briefcase? I mean, you might drive around for weeks, months, years, maybe all your life and still never find that one back porch. But how fast could you find it if I drew you a map? And how much faster could you find it if I gave you a GPS system to check in on all along your journey towards the destination of that back porch? You could go directly to it. And that's the difference between having goals and not having goals, and then a map to actually get to that destination. And most people, as you mentioned, wander around in life aimlessly, then wonder why they never find the briefcase or find the life of their ambitions or their dreams or their objectives.
You're absolutely right. It gives you clarity, it gives you confidence, and it gives you calmness. You have this tremendous feeling that you're in control of your life. Now, let's talk about how this works, because all this can sound a little bit mysterious, like there's a genie in a lamp waiting to take your goal order. So you've done a great job demystifying the quote-unquote secret, Darren. What's your explanation of how this goal-setting process actually works?
The secret, as it's called, is not a secret. This idea of the law of attraction is really the law of seeing what you're looking for, if you just want to say it in plain language. It's not some mysterious, esoteric voodoo as it sometimes sounds like as it's being described. It's far simpler and more practical than that. So here's how it works. You only see, experience, and get what you look for. If you don't know what to look for, you certainly won't get it. I could end there, but let me explain further so that our rational brain can finally say, okay, I get it. So the difference in results seems like magic. There's really no magic to this whole process at all. So like it or not, know it or not, by our very nature, we are goal-seeking creatures. Your brain is always trying to align your outer world with what you're seeing, believing, and expecting in your inner world. So when you instruct your brain to look for the things that you want, you will begin to finally see them. In fact, the object of your desire has probably always existed all around you, but your mind and eyes weren't open to it. See, we're surrounded with billions of sensory inputs, visual, audio, physical, information, all day, each day. And to keep ourselves from going insane, we ignore 99.9% of them. You actually, let's talk about this physiologically, have a group of cells in the base of your brainstem that is called a reticular activating system, or a RAS filter, which is the vital function of filtering out 99.9% of all those sensory inputs to keep your systems from being overloaded and you going insane. So the RAS filters all that stuff out that is inconsistent with what we believe or does not support our existing thoughts or is not what we are looking for. Thus, if you get clear about your goals, it gives instructions to your RAS filters to start looking for the ideas, circumstances, and people that line up with what you're looking for. It's kind of like all of a sudden you see all these things that are being magically, quote unquote, attracted to you, but in essence, you're now only seeing what was already there. It's kind of like, Brian, I was looking to buy a new car, and I wanted something distinctive, something different, something unique, not something that everybody had. And so I settled on a particular model and a color and a type and the whole thing. And then once I decided what it is that I wanted, I started looking around and I saw this car everywhere. It's like all of a sudden everybody decided to buy the same freaking car, but in reality, they were always there all the time, but I didn't see them because I wasn't actually paying attention or looking for them. Another example is like you're walking through a loud, crowded airport. I mean, just being bombarded with a caustic noise. And then in the far distance, somebody says your name and you immediately snap your neck and pull that one audio input out of the whole spectrum of that noise and hear it. That's your RAS filters working. And so that's what happens when you decide what it is that you want. All of a sudden, you will start to see what seems like magic, the people, circumstances, ideas, and supporting information that you need in order to accomplish that. And so that's really kind of uncovering the mystery there and explaining how it works. So let me do this, Brian. Let's talk about some of the mistakes that people make in regards to our goal setting, or as I like to term it, goal achieving, as there's a big difference between the two. Let me discuss first off a few mistakes that I see. Here's number one. When we were kids, we thought we could write down everything that we wanted and mail it to the North Pole. And then magically all our desires would appear on schedule under the tree in our living room, complete with a pretty paper and bow. When we grew up, we realized there wasn't really a big roly-poly guy who flew around the world in a single night on a sled pulled by reindeer and squeezed down our chimney and delivered those presents. So we found out that a real person had to go out, sacrifice, earn money, march through the shopping malls, wrestle that stuff home, put it together, wrap it up, and place it under the tree. But Brian, I think many people still believe in Santa Claus because you simply cannot write down a list of wants on New Year's Day, stick it in a drawer for the rest of the year, and wait around for your life to change. You will need to design, stick to, measure, improve, sacrifice, stay committed to a diligent achievement plan, month by month, week by week, day by day, tested every hour of the day. And that's why I think extraordinary achievement is so rare. It's the work part that separates the men from the boys, the women from the girls, and the super achievers from the mediocre. So what do you see as some of the big mistakes people make in setting goals, Brian?
I think one of the great obstacles I've seen is people think they already have goals. If you talk to an audience and you say, how many people here have goals? Everybody raises their hand. But they don't have goals. They have what I call wishes. They have delusions. They have fantasies. They say, I want to be happy, and I want to be healthy, I want to be thin, and I want to be rich, and so on. But I say people in asylums under serious medication have these same fantasies and illusions. These are not goals. And what I found is that if people think they already have goals, they never bother to set any. And so that's the first thing. They think they already have goals, but they don't, because a goal is like a blueprint for a home. It's like a shopping list. It's something that's clear and specific and written down and organized that you can follow. I think another mistake that people make, Darren, is when they get excited about goals, and I've seen this over and over, I've spoken to maybe 5 million people in 60 countries now, is they set impossible goals at the beginning. They say, wow, this goal setting is great. I'm going to be a billionaire in 1 year. That's my goal. And I'll say, well, how much are you worth now? Well, I'm broke and in debt. I said, what kind of work do you do? Well, I'm unemployed. I just got fired for incompetence. I said, well, then why don't you try to be worth $1,000 in 1 year rather than $1 billion? Because if you set goals that are too far beyond your capacity, they actually act as demotivators, Darren. They actually kick the chair out from under you psychologically. You very soon quit and you say, this stuff doesn't work. So the starting point is to set a goal that causes you to stretch a little bit, but that's realistic and has about a 50% possibility of achievement.
I want to add a couple of mistakes that I see as well that I had to learn over time because I was making these mistakes myself. And the first one is I always suggest that somebody, before they start deciding what it is that they want, instead of just focusing on what they lack, in other words, what they don't have, because again, your RAS filter will then start searching the world over to validate all that you don't have, is to start in gratitude. It's like take an inventory of what you already have that is incredible, that is wonderful, that is marvelous, that is abundant, that is joyful. And it changes the, I will say, radar system of your RAS filters to start in abundance, to start in gratitude, and then think on how can you layer on top of that. My wife is one of 7 from an immigrant family, and her mother always tells a story that what they would do before Christmas morning is they'd have to get all their toys out and lay them in the family room. In other words, take an inventory of all the great toys they already had, and then their parents would just add the 2 or 3 gifts on top of the pile, and it looked like they had all this enormous prosperity. But if all they had there were the 2 or 3 things, or what they didn't have, an empty family room, it would look like they lacked a lot. So start in gratitude, start with the abundance you already have. The other I want to suggest, Brian, is that when people start thinking about what it is that they want, they focus on only 1 or 2 areas of their life too deeply without considering the rest. They create this imbalance. And my other mentor, Mr. Jim Rohn, said, be careful what you give up in pursuit of what it is that you want. And it reminds me of a very poignant experience that I had. My dad had a really good friend who grew up in Arkansas in a farming town who was one of 9 children. And this man rose up from abject poverty to become incredibly wealthy. He ended up owning over 100 units of real estate and accumulated a staggering pile of cash. He was very vivacious and charismatic, and he saw business as a dog-eat-dog chess match with his financial statement serving as a scorecard. He contracted cancer in his life, and I went to visit him with my dad, and it ended up becoming the day before he died. We didn't know it at the time, of course. We laughed with him. We chatted about his many accomplishments in life for over an hour, and then as we were leaving, he called me back into the room, just me. And when I approached his bed, he grabbed me by the arm and he said, "Don't miss the point like I did." He said, "I wish I'd spent as much time and energy accumulating relationships as I had houses. I wish I'd invested my heart as aggressively as I did my money. Now do I only understand true wealth, and none of it appears on a balance sheet." So when it comes to figuring out what it is that you want, don't forget to include all areas of life that are important to you. So let's talk about the process of designing your goals, because the process is actually quite simple. However, I think that there are grave mistakes that people make in the design process that inhibit their ability to actually achieve these goals. So let's dispense a couple of more good failing vaccines before we move on. So I'll start with one and give you some time to think about it. This is a big epiphany that I discovered only over the last couple of few years, and that is all my life since 18, I've set big, hairy, audacious goals. I had no problem with just going for the big goals, for what's seemingly impossible. And so these were all really business goals that were, tangible and measurable and so forth. So I'd set these big, giant business goals, and then I would try to figure out how to have a life around that, right? And I sat down with a mentor a couple of years ago, and he said, why don't you flip that? Instead, decide how you want to live, what kind of life you want to have, what kind of lifestyle you want to lead, and then figure out what kind of a business supports that. And that changed my life, because it was for the first time that I made my life the priority and the focus of my goal designing rather than my business, which actually was at great sacrifice to my life. So I just suggest that to those listening. When you decide to sit down and write your goals, decide first what kind of life and lifestyle you want to have, and then what are the goals for your business, monetarily, financially, professionally, what have you, that supports that life. That would be one of my great suggestions. How about you, Brian?
Well, there's a couple of questions that I ask. I always say to my audience, I say, in 30 seconds or less, write down your 3 most important goals in life. Right now, 3 most important goals in life. It's called the quick list method. And what happens when you only have 30 seconds to answer that question is your answers will be as accurate as if you had 30 minutes or 3 hours. And almost invariably, I say, now, let me see if I can guess at what you wrote down. And they'll all smile and wait. I say you wrote down a relationship goal, a financial goal, and a health goal. And they'll all smile and laugh, and sometimes the audience will applaud, because those are the 3 critical goals in life: your relationships, your health, and your financial situation. And once you're clear about that, then you can start to tease it out and write down your goals in a greater extent. So that's the starting point, is be very clear about what you want. And this design process I teach over and over again is to decide what you want, write it down, make a plan to achieve it, organize the plan, and work on it every day. Simple as pie.
Yeah, let me offer another failure vaccine in this process. And I discovered this after I interviewed Maria Shriver. And I remember asking her the question, of course, as publisher of Success, how do you define success? And she said, that was the big epiphany. She said, I used to define success in the eyes of my parents, in the eyes of my family, in the eyes of the American legacy. And she said, I finally discovered that I needed to define success for me. And that was, I wanted to be a great daughter to my father in his final years. I wanted to be a great daughter to my mother. I wanted to be a great mother to my children. I wanted to be a great friend for my friends. And that was the definition of success. And I remember listening to that and going, wow, how many of us are living other people's goals? We're making our goals their goals based on what they think we should be doing, and we're still trying to live to their desires for us rather than what truly makes our heart sing and what truly makes us feel fulfilled and what's soulful fulfilling to us. So I just suggest that other people consider that as well. Are these your goals or are they somebody else's goals? Be sure that they are completely your goals. And then the other thing that was a discovery along this process, Brian, is sometimes setting goals can make you too narrow focused, too myopic. In today's day and age when things are changing so fast, you have to actually provide some flexibility. So I sort of equate it to this idea of freestyle jazz. It's this real art form and it looks like it's fluid and, there are no rules. What people don't realize is that there are actually a set of rules that you have to abide by in order to make jazz. And it's what separates it from noise. Everybody sticks to a key, a timing, a signature. There are bars for the solo and who's going to take the handoff. And then once you have that solid base structure, then you can be flexible and go fluidly and create this art form. Well, that's goal setting. So here's the base of what it is that you want and the idea of how you're going to get there, but be flexible along the way because you're probably going to have to play some jazz on the path between point A and point B of achieving your goals. So what I want to do is, Brian, try to boil this down for people. And I'm going to ask you the question, what's the biggest lesson or distinction that you ever learned when it comes to actually achieving goals or realizing greater success? And I'll give you some time to think about it. I'll share with you mine and then look forward to hearing yours. This came from my mentor, Jim Rohn. It was probably the most pivotal thing that he ever said, at least at the beginning, because it really set me in a totally new direction. At that point, I met him when I was 24 years old, and I had achieved a level of success by just through brute force. I just outworked and out-prospected and out-failed and out-got rejected by everybody else in my marketplace. But I couldn't do anymore. I was working 16 to 18 hours a day. It was impossible for me to do anymore. And this is when Jim said in a seminar that I met him at, how many people want to have more? Of course I wanted to have more. I waited to have him tell me what I needed to do. And he says, if you want to have more, you have to become more. He said, success is not something you pursue. What you pursue eludes you. As he said, it's kind of like chasing butterflies. He said, success is something you attract by the person you become. So whatever it is that you have as a goal, instead of trying to just focus on what you have to do to achieve that goal, write down who do you need to become to achieve that goal. So if you want to have greater intimacy in your relationship, who do you need to become to have greater intimacy in your relationship? If you want to be a better leader for your company or your community, who do you need to become to achieve that goal? If you want to grow your business 2 or 3x, you want to make more money, you want to become worth more money even, who do you need to become in order to achieve that goal? That was pivotal for me. And it's when you start to look at the world at large, you see people who win the lottery, 10 million, 50 million, $100 million, and 3 years later, they're back to being broke. Or people who go on these big crash diets and they lose all this weight, and then you check back in 6 months later and they've gained all the weight back and then some. Why is that? What I equate it to is like a thermostat. That whatever the thermostat temperature is set to, no matter what happens on the outside, it will return the room's temperature to the set point. So if it's set at 70 degrees and all of a sudden it gets really hot outside, air conditioning kicks on, brings the temperature back to 70 in the room. If it's set at 70 and it gets really cold outside, the heat will kick in, it'll bring it back up to 70 degrees. Well, that's what happens in life. No matter what happens on the outside, you win a lot of money or you go on a crash diet, ultimately, your thermostat's going to kick in and it's going to bring your outside world to match your internal world. So you can only ever achieve what matches your level of personal development, your personal self-image, your level of self-identity. So if you actually want to accumulate more on the outside, the key to that equation is to become more on the inside. There's no other way around it. So key point is to raise your set point. And when you raise your set point, magically, it seems, everything on the outside raises to match it. Any other ideas or lessons or distinctions that you learned in the process of achieving goals, Brian?
I think that's one of the most profound insights on goal setting. One of the things that I would put in has to do with happiness. And what we know is that happiness is the driving force of virtually all of human life. People are successful to the degree to which they can achieve their own happiness. And what Aristotle said was that human beings are purposeful and that they're only happy when they feel that they are moving step by step toward the accomplishment of something that is important to them. So it's only when you feel the sense of forward motion towards something that's important to you, as you said, a personal goal, that you actually feel happy. One of the turning points in my life was when I realized that each person has extraordinary potential. My friend Dennis Waitley says that you could not use your whole potential if you had 100 lifetimes, and that the way that you unlock all of this potential is by having big, clear, exciting goals and then moving toward them step by step each day. And what it does is it just activates all the positive aspects of your mind, and it makes you truly happy. So the process of becoming more so that you can achieve more is really the process of becoming a very happy and fulfilled person.
So Brian, let's now provide some ideas on how to stick to your goals, because this is the big problem people have, right? They don't have a problem creating New Year's resolutions. They have a problem sticking to them. So offer a few tips, tools, or methods that you use to sticking with your newly declared goals.
Well, if you wanted to be physically fit, you exercise on a regular basis. So what I teach people, I would say, I'm going to introduce you to your new best friend. And I would hand out a series of spiral notebooks, school notebooks. And I say, what I'm going to ask you to do is for the next 30 days, write down your 10 most important goals in the present tense in this spiral notebook. You can write down more or less if you like, but always you write down your 10 goals without looking back to what you wrote yesterday. And I said, within 30 days, your whole life will be transformed. People came back to me and said they got more progress and success from that exercise in 30 days than they had from 3 years of working with another process. So number one is get up every morning. Like you say, get up in the morning and read for 30 minutes in something that is uplifting, educational, inspiring, and then write out your 10 goals. What you do by writing your goals each morning, you actually program them into your subconscious mind. You activate your reticular cortex. You stimulate your subconscious and superconscious minds. You start to attract into your life people and circumstances to make them come true. All of these things happen by simply rewriting your goals each morning in the present tense, and it takes about 3 or 4 minutes.
We're talking about the topic that I would say is the number one skill that I would attribute any unusual success that I've had. And the number one attribute is how to actually achieve them. And that is my ability to stay consistent. I, of course, learned this from my father. And if you read The Compound Effect, you know exactly how I was woken up each morning, which is the sound of iron pounding off of the concrete floor of our garage as my dad did his old school powerlifting, deadlifts, and other, strongman exercises. And he exemplified consistency, and he exemplified a routine. And that's, I think, the key to beating anybody at anything. No matter how talented, experienced they are, you can beat anybody at anything if you can just stay more consistent. Invariably, people, over time, their discipline starts to wane. And if you just stay consistent, man, the tortoise always beats the hare. Now, the best way to stay consistent, I always find, is that whatever key behaviors I need to be performing on a day-to-day basis that will attribute my being able to reach my top 3 goals, I try to build them into a routine so that I don't have to think about it. If I have to make a decision about the key behaviors every single day, that becomes difficult to do day in and day out. So I try to build it into a routine. So the 2 times of your day that you can control, because we all know that chaos ensues in the middle of everybody's day, is when you first get up, as you were talking about, Brian, and just before you go to bed. So whatever the key behaviors are that are going to be most important to you accomplishing your goals, build them into a routine that you do without even thinking about it, just when you get up and just before you go to bed. Those are the sort of keys to being consistent, and it's consistency that will ultimately bring you to the destination that you are after. So, Brian, let's see if we can make all this clear and as simple as possible. Take your best advice on the subject and try to boil it down to a 3-point action plan to achieving your goals, dreams, and aspirations. You go ahead and start, and then I'll offer one myself.
Well, thank you. I was giving some thought to this. My number one would be for you to decide exactly what it is you want in each area of your life and write it down and set a date for its completion. My second one would be to make a plan, a list, and work on it every single day. And my third is to get up and get going every single morning on your goal. Decide what you want, make a plan, work on it every day. Darren, let's hear your thoughts on this. What would be your 3?
Yeah, I think I would roll it into what I call my massive transformation formula. And it really can be as simple as this. It doesn't matter whether you have 10 goals, 100 goals, 1,000 goals. Really, it's like what Jim Collins says. If you have more than 3 priorities, you probably don't have any. If you have more than 3 goals, you probably don't have any. But let's just say these are the 3 most important. It goes back to the first thing you said, Brian, which was, what would it take for you to have your best year ever. The best year of your life, what 3 things would need to be accomplished? So those are probably your top 3 goals. So you write that down, your big 3. Number 2, what's the key behavior? If you had to boil it down to one key behavior for achieving each goal, what would that one behavior be that you would have to do consistently day in and day out? And if you did, it would have the major contribution to you accomplishing that goal. That's number 2, one key behavior. And then number 3, track it. Just simply track the number of times you perform that behavior on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter basis. And so inside the Living Your Best Year Ever program that I've got, there's what's called a weekly rhythm register. And it allows you to take all these ambitions and dreams and goals that you've got, roll it up to your top 3, the top 1 or 2 behaviors to accomplishing each one of those goals, and then a single dashboard to just track, check, 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 and to see whether you're on track or off track on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis so that you can use this as a gyroscope, right? A plane that takes off in LA and is headed for LaGuardia is off track 99% of the time, but the gyroscope kicks in and brings the plane back on track. But if it didn't, it'd probably end up 150 miles off course. Well, that's what most people's lives are like, is that they set a destination on the tarmac on point A, and then they don't check in. And they end up 150 miles off course and wonder why. On a quarter-to-quarter, month-to-month, week-to-week, and day-to-day basis, you have to readjust your gyroscope to see whether you're on track or off track. So it's as simple as that. Your big 3 goals, the 1 or 2 key behaviors to achieve in each one of those goals, and then tracking it, and then just being aware of whether you're on track or off track all along the way. So, Mr. Brian Tracy, this has been a delight. I'm just delighted to be able to take a guy that has contributed so much to my goal-achieving discipline and acumen to be able to have this lively discussion with you, and you and I trade ideas back and forth. And as a result of that, all of our listeners being impacted, and hopefully you and I will have made a great contribution to hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands, if not maybe millions of people going out and achieving their seemingly impossible goals in 2013. Thanks for sharing your time and your great ideas with us here at Success, Brian.
Thank you, Darren. And one last reminder, make a decision today to make this the best year of your life.